Archaeologists have been searching for Alexander the Great's tomb for centuries, but one researcher claims that he's discovered it in Greece. Today, I'm going to tell you all about it, plus take you through some other shocking historical mysteries. Alexander's tomb. Archaeologists recently uncovered skeletal remains at a burial site from the 4th century BC in northeast Greece. It's believed that this site could be the largest ancient tomb ever found in the country. It's a magnificent place, complete with a set of beast statues guarding the entrance. Experts think it may have been where Alexander the Great was buried 2,300 years ago. The truth of Alexander's tomb has eluded historians for centuries. The records say that he died from a fever in the city of Babylon on the evening of June 11th, 323 BC. The ruler of Macedonia had just led his great army across Asia Minor, Syria, and Egypt. He conquered territories that were previously held by the Persians on his journey to rule the world. The greatest battle fought by Alexander and his Macedonian soldiers was at Gaugamela in what's now Iraq in 331 BC. After Alexander crushed the Persians, forever changing the world, he still wasn't finished. But his desire for conquest would lead him to disaster. Alexander pushed his army further than anyone imagined. They traveled 11,000 miles, founded an estimated 70 cities, and spread their empire across 3 continents. But at the age of 32, Alexander grew irreversibly ill. Experts don't know what killed him, though there are a lot of guesses. It may have been malaria, or maybe the West Nile virus, or maybe he was poisoned. Whatever it was, he died in the old palace of Nebuchadnezzar II in Babylon. Where his body was taken after, though, is one of the greatest historical mysteries ever. The new tomb discovered in Greece was found in Amphipolis. It was encircled by a massive marble wall and was guarded by a pair of megalithic sphinxes. Inside, archaeologists identified depictions of Persephone, goddess of the underworld and daughter of Zeus. The tomb has been dated to between 300 and 325 BC. That was exactly when Alexander perished. The date matches perfectly. Considering its size and impressiveness, this could have been his final resting place. The big bummer is that there is no definitive proof. His name hasn't been found anywhere, and there are no specific artifacts that can be linked to him. It is convincing, but can't be proven 100%. So, scientists may never find the glorious tomb of Macedonia's greatest king. And now, for a quick break, I want to give a big shout out to Hillary and Jeffrey, who have been with us a long time, and Salty 82nd Veteran. Thanks so much for watching and supporting Origins Explained. If you are new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button and join the family. Are mermaids real? There is an archaeological site in India with a very long name that most people have never heard of. It's called Chandraketugarh, and it's been around for over 2,400 years. The reason I'm telling you about it now is that it could contain evidence of a real-life mermaid. In 400 BC, Chandraketugarh was a prosperous coastal city. It thrived thanks to a bustling trading industry, with international merchants coming to the city from all around the world. It lasted until about 1250 AD, but now nothing remains except some ancient brick ruins. And one of the more intact remains is a Buddhist temple that was built 1,000 years ago. Scattered across the remnants of the old city are broken pottery shards and a few terracotta plaques. A series of plaques, which appear to date the Shunga period, around 200 BC, show locals interacting with a mermaid. The plaques depict a woman naked from the waist up with a fishtail from the waist down. It's highly unusual because you don't really see mermaids in Indian folklore. They aren't nearly as common as in other places like ancient Greece. One plaque shows a mermaid swimming in a body of water with ordinary humans gaping at her from the shore. One of the men on shore is also holding a net, looking like he's interested in capturing the mermaid. In another plaque, the mermaid is trapped in a fishing net. The series seems to be showing an event in which people discovered a mermaid off the coast and then caught her. Maybe it's a fantasy or maybe it's reality. There's really no way to know for sure. The evidence does seem to suggest that the people of this town discovered and captured a mermaid. But could these creatures have been commonplace in the past, only to be brought to extinction by greedy humans? Let me know your thoughts in the comment. The Solid Muldoon. In September 1877, a man named William A. Conant traveled through southern Colorado. He discovered a large stone figure of a man that was situated about 25 miles from Pueblo. Not a stone figure as in a statue, but a real human man who was petrified in stone. It looked like the guy had tangled with Medusa and seriously regretted it. William was out in that barren desert searching for treasure. He discovered a variety of fossils, including the bones of an old sea turtle. It was the search for fossilized treasure that brought him to Pueblo, where he found the petrified man. He supposedly used a pickaxe to free the figure from where he was stuck in a larger block of hardened clay. Once freed, the stone giant was a whopping 7.5 feet tall and weighed 450 pounds. But the face had features you might expect to see in someone of Asian descent, not someone from the Colorado wilderness. William also noted that the figure had a physique not unlike the men depicted in ancient Egyptian pictures. Oh, and there's one big thing I forgot to mention. The stone statue had a tail. It was only about 2 inches long, sticking out like an extra piece of spine from his backbone. The creature, or petrified man, whatever it was, became known as Solid Muldoon. Speculation ran wild as news of the discovery spread across America. One of these skeptics was E. Shelburne, the editor of the Pueblo, Colorado Weekly Chieftain. He and his colleagues went to investigate the excavation site, but none of them were convinced, and they published their opinions in the paper. It turned out to be a massive scam. In reality, there was no petrified giant. A man named Mr. Hull had commissioned the stone figure in his factory in Connecticut. Then it was placed in the wilderness for William Conant to find, and for the masterminds to make money off of. People paid to see the stone giant for a long time before it was finally dismissed as a hoax. There are those who still think the giant was real, and that some greater power buried the discovery by dismissing it as a hoax. After all, it wasn't the only time an alleged giant was discovered in North America, only to mysteriously vanish. The Parallel Universe. A Nazi coin that was discovered in Mexico could prove the existence of a parallel universe. Now that might be a sentence that nobody's ever said before. The story is shaky at best, so take it with a grain of salt. The coin was allegedly found by Diego Aviles somewhere in Mexico. On one side of the coin is the Nazi swastika being carried by an eagle, and below that the year 2039 is stamped. Then above the imprint of the year are the words Nueva Alemania, which translates into English as New Germany. If the coin is real, it appears to be from a parallel timeline in which the Nazis won the war and conquered the Americas. If a parallel universe is too extreme for you, there is another explanation. The coin could be from a very frightening future in which Germany played a key role in World War III. But is the coin even real? Well, that's a matter of great speculation. The coin may have been changed from 1939 to 2039. But then again, the whole New Germany thing in Spanish really doesn't make sense. Mexico declared war on Germany in 1942. There was never a point where Mexico was in danger of being occupied. I can't tell you if the coin is real or if it's an elaborate hoax that appeared online. But what I can say is that it's not the only rumor of time travel or alternate dimensions connected to the Third Reich. They allegedly had a weapon known as the Nazi Bell, which functioned as a time machine. Germany was even in the midst of developing psychic super soldiers when they were defeated in World War II. The Unseen God. How would you depict an ancient god that was invisible? Maybe I should just show you a white screen or a black screen. This was the bizarre conundrum that Egyptian priests were dealing with several thousand years ago when it came to Medjed the Smiter. You likely know the big names in the Egyptian pantheon like Ra, Isis, and Osiris. But did you know that there may have been as many as 1,500 gods in Egypt? Most of them were minor deities, gods whose tales are lost to time. And everything Egyptologists know about Medjed the Smiter comes from a single line of text. His name only appears in the Book of the Dead, a fact that was discovered by researchers decrypting the text in 2010. The Book of the Dead was used in funerals during the New Kingdom in 1550 BC. The book is full of magical spells to help the deceased on their journey through the underworld. In the text, Medjed appears in spell number 17. All it says is that Medjed the Smiter belongs to the House of Osiris and is unseen. This is the only instance of Medjed appearing in a text, but he also shows up twice in the Greenfield Papyrus, though he's shown in physical form. There isn't anything that mentions what he does or why. It's really funny when you look at the image because you see gods like Anubis depicted as a jackal. Then there's Medjed looking like somebody in a bad Halloween costume. It appears as though he has a sheet over his head with eye holes cut into it, with his bare legs sticking out the bottom. You can clearly see how the artists were struggling to depict a god who was supposed to be invisible. But as for what Medjed did or what role he played in ancient Egypt, experts really don't know. The Great Mace. The greatest unsolved crime in Australia dates back to 1891. From Victoria's Parliament, an extremely rare medieval weapon was taken by thieves. It's been over a century and there is still a reward of $50,000 for anyone who can crack the old case. 1891 wasn't a great year for Australia, for Melbourne in particular. The sewers caught fire, and a random pair of human legs suddenly showed up in the street. There was briefly a plague of locusts, and don't forget the flood. Then, in the midst of the endless disasters, somebody stole the ceremonial mace. It was a gold-plated mace from the Middle Ages that was meant for combat. The weapon was used ceremonially as part of a tradition practiced by the Australian Parliament. They inherited the tradition from Great Britain. At the beginning of each day in Parliament, the mace was carried in by the Sergeant-at-Arms. Then, at the end of the session, it was carried out and placed on a special table. Sometimes, if a politician was thrown into a frenzy, they'd pick up the mace and wave it around. Just after midnight on October 9th, Frederick Davis and George Edward Upward locked the ceremonial mace in its special box. When they did this, it was approximately 20 minutes to 1 in the morning. Then, 12 hours later, when representatives went to open the box, they found it still locked, but the mace wasn't inside. So they found a slightly shabbier mace to continue with tradition. There was a small police investigation that didn't dredge up any leads, and the whole thing came and went without much of a fuss. It was about a year later that rumors began to circulate. There were whispers that parliamentarians held a party with sex workers the night the artifact went missing. Somebody removed the weapon and brought it to the brothel after the party, then lost track of it. Maybe it happened and maybe it didn't, but the mace is still missing today. The grave robber of Salt Lake City. In January 1862, Moroni Clausen died and was buried in the public cemetery of Salt Lake City. Several days later, his grave was found defiled, and his corpse was left completely naked. A police investigation led to the search of Jean-Baptiste's house. Jean was found with over 60 pairs of shoes, along with the clothing and personal belongings of dead people. It turned out that he'd robbed about 300 graves. So Jean-Baptiste was arrested and was sent to prison. When the public found out about it, they were furious. Jean couldn't be kept inside the local prison because even the prisoners knew at least one person whom he'd robbed straight from the grave. City officials decided to secretly put Jean-Baptiste in a wagon and take him to the remote Fremont Island. He was to be kept there as a prisoner, trapped on the island by himself. Jean's exile didn't last long though. Within 3 weeks, he'd absconded from his open-air jail. A dead cow was found on the island by some herders, along with evidence of tanned leather and pieces of wood ripped from an old ranch house. Jean-Baptiste disappeared, presumably after building himself a canoe. 30 years later, in 1893, a mysterious skeleton was discovered at the mouth of the Jordan River. There was a lot of speculation at the time that the skeleton belonged to Jean-Baptiste, but it was never proven. Unfortunately, it's still unknown what exactly happened to the grave robber, making this story one of the weirdest in Utah's early history. Time travel secrets. A shocking new claim says that the Great Pyramid of Giza was built by alien visitors who were able to travel at the speed of light. And according to Mano Saifzadeh, he has evidence to prove it. Manu isn't a legitimate scientist. He is a self-proclaimed researcher who believes that the Pyramid of Giza contains the secret of light speed travel. There isn't much substance to the claim, but I'm going to tell you about it anyway because it's fun. The first thing that you need to know is that the speed of light is approximately 299,792,458 meters per second. In all honesty, it doesn't matter what it is in feet because then the discovery doesn't work. It only works in meters because when you look at the geographic coordinates of the Great Pyramid, they are nearly a direct match. The coordinates for the pyramid are 29.9792458 degrees north. It's a really shocking coincidence that the coordinates are the same as the speed of light. It's almost so coincidental that it couldn't possibly be true. If the pyramid was placed purposely so that the coordinates match the speed of light, that means this structure was placed next to the Nile by aliens. It would absolutely destroy all of the accepted history. Ancient Egyptians didn't know what the speed of light was, and humans didn't figure it out until around 1950. The speed of light is theorized as the only way to time travel or make any meaningful trip through the universe. If aliens didn't put the pyramid exactly where it is on purpose, then this is a really bizarre 9-digit coincidence.
Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed. The Osiris Shaft. Under the causeway of Khafre at Giza in Egypt, there is an underground shaft filled with water. Researchers learned back in 1945 that tour guides would go down there to swim, but failed to investigate the chamber. Meanwhile, the shaft became a popular swimming hole and an attraction for people who believed that the shaft was connected to tunnels that led to the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx. After so many stories and speculation, in 1999, Egyptologist Zahi Hawass finally excavated the site, nicknamed the Osiris Shaft. His team discovered a complex of chambers descending 125 feet below ground and consisting of 3 levels. They found at least 7 sarcophagi belonging to elite priests. 5 of the coffins were removed from the site, and 2 remain. The Osiris Shaft was originally dated to 600 BC, but many experts believe it's much older. The deepest chambers are waterlogged, and previous attempts to pump them out have failed. Experts do not know where the water comes from, but its levels fluctuate, and it's impossible to get rid of. Some believe that a partially submerged sarcophagus in one of the chambers is the tomb of the god Osiris. Others have suggested that the same shaft contains a portal to another dimension, and that only people with the correct DNA can pass through. The coffin has never been opened, leaving its contents a mystery. There are also tunnels connected to the complex that haven't been explored and that may run for miles. It's possible that the network predates the pyramids, or even the Egyptians themselves. There is a lot more going on here than meets the eye. Lady Dai. Construction workers accidentally came across a very impressive tomb in China. A noblewoman named Xin Zhui lived during the Han Dynasty almost 2,000 years ago. Nicknamed Lady Dai, she enjoyed a life of luxury, including live musical entertainment, foods that were reserved specifically for the elite, makeup, and fine textiles like silk. Lady Dai's tomb remained untouched for nearly 2,000 years until 1968, when workers discovered the grave 40 feet underground. Much to the surprise of experts, the woman's skin, hair, and organs were still intact. An analysis of her blood revealed that she died from a heart attack. Nobody knows entirely why Lady Dai's body was so remarkably well preserved. Her tomb was lined with thick layers of clay, soil, and charcoal, which absorbed oxygen and kept the grave sealed airtight. But this alone does not solve the mystery. Xin Zhui died around 163 BC at age 50, with a host of health problems, including heart disease, gallstones, high cholesterol, and liver disease. She was laid to rest in an elegant tomb containing over 1,000 grave goods, including makeup, toiletries, tapestries, carved wooden figurines representing her staff, and even a meal to eat in the afterlife. She was placed in the innermost coffin out of 4 caskets that were placed within each other like Russian dolls. Her body was wrapped in 20 layers of silk and immersed into 21 gallons of an unidentified liquid. The substance was found to be slightly acidic and contains traces of magnesium, but its other compounds are unknown. Whatever it is, it helped to make Lady Di the best preserved mummy ever found. The disappearance of Walter Collins. One day in 1928, 9-year-old Walter Collins went to the movies in Los Angeles, California. He was never seen or heard from again. At the time, the LAPD was being investigated for alleged corruption. On top of that, its inability to find Walter was greatly humiliating to the department. The police followed many leads, but got nowhere in their search. Meanwhile, they failed to connect several other disappearances of young children in the region to Walter's case. Several months later, Illinois police picked up a young boy who called himself Arthur Kent. He told the officers that his father had abandoned him, so they put him into temporary foster care. State authorities sent photos of the little boy to California, where police showed the pictures to Walter's mother and tried to convince her that they were of her son. She insisted that the boy was not Walter, but the police captain persuaded her to try him out for a little while. Mrs. Collins returned to the station with dental records and signed witness statements to prove that she had the wrong child, but the police accused her of being crazy and trying to get the state to take care of her son. Then they silenced Walter's mother by throwing her in the psychiatric ward. Soon enough, a witness came forward and claimed that they were forced to watch the murder of Walter Collins and 2 other missing children. Experts found the dismembered bone fragments of little boys at the alleged crime scene, along with tools covered in blood and human hair, but they were unable to trace any evidence to Walter Collins. A handwriting expert compared Walter's handwriting to that of the boy in Mrs. Collins' care and determined that he was not Walter. Finally, the police stopped trying to convince anyone that he was. The boy admitted to the truth and revealed that he had used several aliases in the past. 2 suspects were eventually tried and convicted of the murders of several children, including Walter Collins, but his remains were never found, leaving a shadow of doubt about whether he truly died at the hands of those who confessed to killing him. Mystery of the rarest motorcycle on Earth. While performing repairs at a suburban Chicago home in 1967, a plumber found a rare Traub motorcycle hidden in a bricked-up wall. This Traub, discovered in its dark hiding place, is the only example ever found. It is a one-of-a-kind classic American motorcycle with engineering and construction well ahead of its time. But where did it come from? It was walled up and untouched since 1916, and the story goes that the former owners of the house discovered their son had stolen the Traub motorcycle from the original owner, probably the person who made it. The parents were so angry they forced him to join the military as a punishment for his thieving ways. Sadly, the son went off to fight in World War I and never returned. Before he left, however, he hid the bike and never told a soul where it was, taking the secret to his grave. It was finally discovered 50 years later. It's the only known existing example of a Traub motorcycle ever found, and the bike was found in fantastic condition and even still runs today, despite being over 100 years old. Nobody knows who designed and built the Traub. Historians believe that the creator was a man named Richard Traub, who lived in Chicago's outer suburbs. Back in 1907, he wrote to Motorcycle Illustrated magazine about his homemade 4-horsepower motorcycle. In the letter, he included a photo of himself with the bike. Based on Traub's description, the motorcycle in the picture could be the one that was found in the wall. Another photo has surfaced with a storefront called the Richard Traub Motorcycle Shop in the background, further pointing toward the man as the bike's possible creator. But nobody has ever established for a fact that this is the case. Today, the Traub motorcycle is on display at the Wheels Through Time Museum in Haywood County, North Carolina. Bermeja Island. Several maps of the Gulf of Mexico that were created between the 16th and 20th centuries feature a phantom island known as Bermeja, located off the northern coast of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. It first appeared in 1539 in a Spanish collection of the world's islands. The world map looked quite different in 1539. The weird thing is that later on, Bermeja disappeared from all maps. A more recent search in 1997 failed to locate it. Interest in the island arose once again in 2008, when authorities realized that finding it was important for determining oil exploitation rights. An extensive study was carried out the following year by the National Autonomous University of Mexico. And, like previous attempts by others, the researchers had no luck finding Bermeja. If the island existed, it would give Mexico exclusive drilling rights to an area that is believed to hold vast amounts of oil. Its absence has sparked a conspiracy theory that the CIA destroyed the island in order to give the US access to the area. It's also possible that Bermeja's presence on maps simply resulted from a mapping error. Another theory suggests that shifts in the ocean floor, combined with rising sea levels, submerged the island into the sea. This is plausible, since it's already happened with some islands off Hawaii and Japan, and in the Arctic. But the mystery endures for now, and we may not ever know if Bermeja existed or what happened to it. Dighton Rock. Sometime before 1680, someone scrawled a series of petroglyphs onto a 40-ton boulder in what is now Berkeley, Massachusetts. Nobody knows who created the carvings or what the images mean. The first known record of the inscriptions dates back to 1680, when a man named John Danforth spotted the partially submerged boulder and made a drawing of the symbols that he could see. He suggested that the markings were left by Native Americans, and most modern experts agree that he's probably right. But dozens of alternative theories are floating around. Ezra Stiles, an 18th century theologian and educator, believes that the images symbolize a visit to North America by the Phoenicians. Similar theories claim that the pictures represent Vikings, Portuguese explorers, or visitors from Carthage or Asia. Not to mention, there are also allegations about ancient aliens visiting the site. The boulder was removed from the riverbed for preservation in 1963, giving researchers a better opportunity to study it, but they've come up empty-handed so far in their quest for an explanation. Dancing plague. For several months in 1518, the people of Strasbourg, Alsace, in modern-day France, were struck by a bizarre condition that caused them to dance for days on end. The dancing is described in historical records, but the reasons for it are unknown. It all started when a woman named Mrs. Troffea began dancing uncontrollably in the street. Others joined in, and they were mostly young women. Around 400 people took to dancing at the height of the plague, and it's rumored that the sickness killed as many as 15 people a day at its worst. Local officials noticed the strange behavior and had the dancers put in the hospital. Doctors determined that they were not possessed, but that their blood was overheated. To help the patients through their suffering, the doctors built a wooden stage for them to dance it out. To this day, experts are unsure what caused the dancing plague. They believe it could have been a physical condition, such as food poisoning, or it may have been a case of widespread psychiatric illness, such as mass hysteria, or maybe they all ate dangerous psychedelic mushrooms. At the time, the Alsace region was plagued by disease and starvation, and the people who lived there were known to be superstitious. It makes sense, then, that at least 7 dancing plagues were documented there throughout the Middle Ages. Thankfully, the plague of 1518 subsided on its own after 3 months. The MV Joyita. Built in 1931, the MV Joyita was a 69-foot-long wooden ship that initially functioned as a luxury yacht. After serving in World War II, she fell into private ownership and was chartered as a trading and fishing boat. In 1951, the Joyita left Samoa for the Tokelau Islands with 1 working engine. She had been scheduled to leave the day before, but was having mechanical problems. The vessel set sail with 16 crew members and 9 passengers, as well as cargo including medical supplies, timber, an oil drum, and food. Several days later, officials at the ship's destination reported that the Joyita was overdue. The crew never sent out a distress signal, and an initial search and rescue mission failed to find the vessel. 5 weeks later, the captain of a merchant ship spotted the Joyita over 600 miles from her scheduled route. The passengers, crew, and 4 tons of cargo had vanished from the partially submerged boat. The Joyita had some structural damage, and the radio was tuned into an international distress channel. All of the lifeboats were gone. The starboard deck was covered in mattresses, and there were bloody bandages lying near a doctor's bag full of medical equipment. An investigation determined that the ship was in poor condition, and it wasn't surprising that it encountered problems. But the fate of the crew and passengers remains a mystery to this day. It made no sense that they abandoned the ship, which was extremely buoyant because its holds were lined with cork. There are numerous theories, of course, including the possibility that the captain became injured or incapacitated, and was unable to tell the passengers that the safest option was to stay aboard the waterlogged vessel. In any event, the crew and passengers are still listed as missing. Australia's missing Prime Minister. Harold Edward Holt served as Australia's Prime Minister from 1966 until his suspicious disappearance in 1967. In December that year, he and a group of spearfishing friends stopped at a remote site called Cheviot Beach. While there, Holt reportedly got caught in a riptide and was swept out to sea. Onlookers called out to him, but they didn't hear a response or see his hands in the air. He was presumed dead after one of the largest search operations in Australian history failed to find him. Holt's body was never found, but the government went ahead with a memorial service 5 days after he vanished. It was finally ruled in 2005 that Holt accidentally drowned, but this failed to dissuade conspiracy theorists who have suggested that foul play was involved. Some believe that the CIA played a role in the Prime Minister's death. Others think that Holt may have committed suicide, faked his own death, or caught a ride on a submarine and defected to China. But it's also possible that he simply overestimated his skills in the water. Holt was a seasoned spearfisher and diver, but even the best of the best are no match for a strong riptide. Leading up to his death, his friends and employees warned him that his activities were dangerous. In fact, Holt had a few close calls before he disappeared. At the same beach he went missing from, he got caught in rough waters, turned purple, and began vomiting large amounts of seawater, prompting him to signal for help. Holt blamed the ordeal on a leaking snorkel and continued to ignore the obvious danger he was putting himself in. Another time, he experienced extreme shortness of breath after chasing a coral trout for nearly half an hour. What do you think? Did Prime Minister Holt's recklessness cause his disappearance? Or were more sinister forces at play? Let me know in the comments below. Han Dynasty Tomb. While blasting rocks at a quarrying site in Yangzhou City, China during the 1970s, workers noticed a hole they couldn't explain. An archaeological team reported to the site and found an ancient tomb that had been damaged by explosives. As they worked to salvage the site, they assumed that they were digging up an ordinary grave. But as they continued to unearth artifacts, they realized that they were working with a royal burial. They eventually determined that the tomb belonged to the son of the Emperor Wu of the Han Dynasty, dating back to around the 1st century BC. Liu Shu was Emperor Wu's 4th son. Historical records describe him as being tall and strong, and capable of wrestling with bears, boars, and other animals single-handedly. His tomb was built 82 feet into an extinct volcano, known as the Heavenly Mountain. Lifting out the debris in the ancient tomb was no small feat, but luckily, archaeologists were able to lift it out without it falling apart. After archaeologists excavated the site, it was remodeled to represent what it would have looked like around the time of Liu Shu's burial. Missing Franklin Expedition member. During the 19th century, European explorers competed to find a polar sea route linking the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, known as the Northwest Passage. In the most historically famous and doomed expedition, 128 crew members set sail in 1845 under Captain Sir John Franklin. Sadly, nobody survived. For the first time, experts recently confirmed the identity of a crew member's remains through DNA. Jonathan Gregory, who lives in South Africa, was found to be the great-great-great-grandson of Warrant Officer John Gregory, who traveled aboard the ill-fated HMS Erebus. During the journey, the Erebus and its sister ship, the HMS Terror, became icebound. The crews tried to wait for the ice to break up and melt, but they eventually gave up even though they had set sail with enough food to last them a while longer. After being stranded in the ice for 2 years, they abandoned ship in hopes of making it back to civilization on foot. The men died in different places and at different times throughout the remainder of their quest for survival. People back in Europe were unaware of just how bad things had gotten until Franklin and his men failed to return, and the circumstances of the expedition have long been a mystery. Identifying crew members' remains can help researchers piece this perplexing puzzle together. Author Russell Potter, who wrote a book about the Franklin expedition, told CBC that if experts can identify some more people, they can start to make other connections that will hopefully get them closer to finding out exactly what happened on the voyage. Ancient quarry. The Israel Antiquities Authority recently announced the discovery of a 2,000-year-old quarry. Found at a site called Har Hotzvim, which is Hebrew for Quarrymen's Hill, archaeologists came across it by accident while excavating ahead of a construction project. At the quarry, they uncovered several building blocks. Thousands of them were cut and transported to Jerusalem during the quarry's operating years. The blocks were used for large-scale construction projects during ancient times, and finding the building blocks in their original site reveals a lot about ancient technology and what people used to extract and carve rocks 2,000 years ago. The research team plans to actually mimic these ancient methods using replicas of the tools that the ancients used during the Second Temple period, when they built numerous magnificent structures. Oldest money minting mold. New research shows that the world's first known minting site was in the ancient city of Guangzhou, China. The city's center was home to production facilities for bronze, jade, and bone items, including weapons, instruments, tools, vessels, and money, apparently. During excavations, archaeologists found spade coins, which are long thought to be one of the first forms of coinage in existence. Located near the Yellow River in the country's central plains, this settlement dates back to around 800 BC and was inhabited until 450 BC. The origins of spade coins were a mystery until the team discovered clay casts that were used for manufacturing them amongst the ruins of the city's bronze foundry. Dating back to sometime between 640 and 500 BC, the casts make Guangzhou the world's oldest known reliably dated minting site. Spade coin production was highly standardized. It was done on a large scale and in a very planned and organized fashion, according to the new research. The currency circulated throughout the region until Emperor Qin Shi Huang abolished it in 221 BC. The rise of a money economy changed the world in major ways that we still experience the effects of in our daily lives. Learning more about early coins and money and why it was developed in the first place can help experts better understand modern humanity's exhausting and sometimes obsessive relationship with money. Plague Cemetery. Things took a gruesome turn this summer at a construction site in northern Poland when workers stumbled upon human remains. Archaeologists ended up finding 2 graveyards, including one that dates back between the 17th and 19th centuries, and another from the 18th century when the plague hit the region. Historical records show that the Plague Cemetery was created when there was not enough room for graves outside a local church, according to a local archaeologist. Now, experts believe they have finally found the site. Entire families were buried at the Plague Cemetery. So far, the team has unearthed 60 graves containing the remains of 100 people. Hundreds of thousands of people died in the epidemic known as the Great Northern War Plague. The disease ravaged Poland and other parts of Central Eastern Europe from 1700 to 1721. The recently discovered victims' remains will undergo scientific testing and will probably be reburied in a mass grave. Archaeologists also found the remains of a Neolithic settlement at the site and artifacts dating back to Roman times, letting us know that this place has been important practically since the dawn of humanity. Ancient artwork. While excavating the ancient city of Dicilium in northwestern Turkey earlier this year, a team of researchers unearthed some ancient reliefs depicting the Greeks and Persians at war. Dating back to the 5th century BC, the artwork shows Greek soldiers being trampled on by Persian war horses, according to excavation leader Kaan Iran. The reason this find is so exciting is because the 2,500-year-old images were probably created as propaganda during the Greco-Persian Wars. They were made to show people the might of the empire. The conflicts lasted from 499 BC to 449 BC and were fought between the Achaemenid, or Persian Empire, and an alliance of Greek city-states called the Delian League. The team also uncovered a stone and mud brick wall dating back to the 8th century BC. They believe that the Phrygian civilization built the wall to protect themselves from invaders, and that it was somewhere between 23 and 26 feet high. Healing cult goddess. Archaeologists also working in modern-day Turkey have found a headless marble statue of Hygeia, the Greco-Roman goddess of health and cleanliness. The life-size sculpture was found in the ancient city of Izanoi, which is home to one of Anatolia's best-preserved temples. Like many ancient civilizations, the Greeks relied on gods and goddesses to protect their health. From 500 BC to around 500 AD, Athens was home to a healing cult dedicated to Hygeia and the medical god Asclepius. The cult grew considerably after a plague hit Greece during the 5th century BC. The pain and suffering caused by the disease made many people turn to them for help. By the 2nd century AD, the cult had spread to Rome. The Greeks put sculptures of Hygeia inside temples dedicated to Asclepius. These statues often showed her holding or feeding a snake, which is the Greek symbol for medicine. Elements of Greco-Roman culture reached Aizanoi in 133 BC, when Rome conquered the region. The city's population peaked under Roman rule between the 2nd and 3rd centuries. At the time, it was home to somewhere between 80,000 and 100,000 residents. In addition to the recently discovered statue of Hygeia, archaeologists have unearthed a stadium, theater, gymnasium, several bridges, and more. The disappearing tomb. While excavating an ancient tomb in Sanday on Scotland's Orkney Islands, archaeologists found 2 rare carved stone balls. The 5,500-year-old grave is located on a cliff, but it's disappearing due to erosion from the sea. For the past 4 years, experts have been working tirelessly to preserve the deteriorating tomb before it's lost to history. They don't know what the stone balls were for, but they may have been weapons. It's also possible that they were ceremonial objects, leatherworking tools, or used for fortune-telling or to move construction blocks. Archaeologist Vicky Cummings explained that the tomb may be linked to a nearby Neolithic settlement. In addition to the stone balls, the team unearthed bone and pottery fragments, knives, pot lids, human and animal remains, and more. Around 500 of the stone balls have been found in Scotland, but only 20 or so have been discovered in the Orkney Islands. They have also appeared in other parts of Britain and Ireland, making them even more mysterious. What do you think the stone balls were for? Let me know in the comments below. World War II wreck. Researchers recently identified a wreck in the southern Irish Sea as the World War II minesweeper HMS Mercury. Until recently, researchers believed the wreck was a submarine. But high-quality sonar data showed that the vessel had a boxed paddle wheel with dimensions that matched the Mercury's paddle wheel in marine archives. There are more than 300 wrecks in the area, so researchers have their work cut out for them. Built in 1934 as a passenger ferry, the vessel was repurposed just 5 years later for service in the war. In 1940, the minesweeper was damaged while trying to clear a mine. The entire crew was rescued, and initially it seemed like the ship could possibly be saved. But the tow rope pulling the Mercury broke while the vessel was en route to a shipyard, and it sank vertically to the bottom of the sea. The discovery was made as part of an ongoing project to identify wrecks in the Irish Sea. Scientists are racing against the clock to get the job done before any of the sunken vessels are lost forever. Biblical earthquake. The books of Zechariah and Amos from the Christian Bible talk about an earthquake that happened in Jerusalem around the time when King Uzziah ruled over the kingdom of Judah and Jeroboam had power over Israel. The IAA announced this year that it had found evidence of an earthquake actually happening around that time, which would have been roughly 2,800 years ago. Evidence of the earthquake has turned up elsewhere in the past, but this was the first time archaeologists discovered signs of it in Jerusalem proper. While excavating in the City of David National Park, the team found a layer of destruction from when a building's wall collapsed. The layer contained shattered vessels, bowls, lamps, cooking utensils, and jars, according to the IAA's Facebook page. In their words, the earthquake was probably one of the strongest and most damaging earthquakes in ancient times. The natural disaster was remembered for hundreds of years afterward. Nevertheless, people continue to come to Jerusalem to live in the city built on top of the rubble. Danish treasure hoard. In one of the most incredible archaeological discoveries in Denmark's history, a metal detectorist discovered a kilo of 1,500-year-old gold jewelry. Located near the town of Jelling, it's one of the largest treasure hoards ever found in the country, and it dates back to before the beginning of the Viking Age. Altogether, there are 22 items in the collection. They date back to the 6th century, and the artifacts are quite special because they bear symbols, runes, and motifs that have never been seen before. A wealthy man buried the items in a longhouse during the Iron Age, indicating that the area was once a center of power. He may have deposited the artifacts as an offering to the gods during a stressful period of climate change. In the year 536, a volcano erupted in Iceland, causing Northern Europe's climate to cool considerably. The discovery happened last year, but it was kept secret until recently. The treasure will go on display at a public museum next year, so everyone can go and visit it for themselves. Shark teeth. Archaeologists working at a 2,900-year-old site in Jerusalem, City of David, recently unearthed 29 fossilized shark teeth dating back roughly 80 million years, when the dinosaurs still roamed the earth. A recently published study on the artifacts concluded that a person transported them to Jerusalem, but researchers are unsure exactly how or why. The teeth may have been part of a collection and were discovered at a site called the Rock Cut Pool, along with fish bones, seals called bullae, which were used for sealing confidential documents, and other discarded materials dating back to the time of King Solomon. Someone in the ancient world might also have really loved collecting fossils. Speaking at this year's Goldschmidt conference, lead researchers said that the shark teeth were probably valuable to someone, but the team doesn't know why. They resemble other fossilized shark fossils found in the Negev desert over 50 miles away, and come from several ancient species, including the extinct Squalecorax group. The researchers initially thought the teeth were part of an array of food waste dumped at the site, but a reviewer of their work pointed out that they could have only come from a long-extinct late Cretaceous shark. Similar teeth have been found at other archaeological sites throughout Israel, and are also believed to be sourced and transported from elsewhere. Thanks for watching! Remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!